Good morning, everyone. My name is Reese Proctor, and I'm going to be presenting on the Air France Flight 4590 crash. The Concorde was a supersonic turbo-powered passenger airliner that was built under a joint program between France and Great Britain. The Concorde was flown for the first time in 1969 and entered into commercial operation in 1976. On July 25, 2000, 100 passengers and 9 crew members arrived at Charles de Gaulle Airport outside of Paris, France, to fly to John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. The flight had been chartered by Peter Dillman Cruises to fly the passengers to New York to board a 16-day cruise. It was noted that the Concorde that day had been weighted several tons overweight, which caused the center of gravity to shift, and this would come into effect later. And the center of gravity on the Concorde was very small, and it had very little margin of error because of the extreme aerodynamics of the Concorde. It was also discovered when the Concorde landed in France that the reverse thrust mechanism needed to be replaced, but there were no new reverse thrust mechanisms available. So Air France contacted the manufacturer, who said the part would be fine to fly to New York. However, pilot Christian Marty demanded that the reverse thrust mechanism be replaced. So the reverse thrust mechanism was taken off of another airplane and fitted onto the Concorde. This repair delayed the takeoff of the Concorde by over an hour. And when it came time for the Concorde to take off, just 5 minutes before, a Continental Airlines DC-10 used the same runway to take off, and during takeoff, it lost a titanium alloy weather strip on the runway. And standard takeoff protocol for the Concorde said that there was to be a runway inspection before the Concorde would take off. However, this was not followed. I think this wasn't followed because of complacency due to the lack of crashes of the Concorde in the past, or by the fact that the Concorde had already been delayed by an hour and they were trying to hurry and get the Concorde to New York. As the Concorde began speeding down the runway at approximately 204 miles per hour, the Concorde struck the metal strip, which blew up the tire, and a piece of the disintegrated tire struck the underside of the airplane where fuel tank 5 was located, and this sent a shockwave through the fuel tank, which caused the fuel tank to rupture and spill gas down the underside of the airplane, which was then ignited by either heat from the engines or by an electrical arc on the landing gear. There was now only 1.2 miles of runway left, and the Concorde could not come to a safe stop in that time, so its only choice was to take off. However, engines 1 and 2 surged, and engine 2 did not recover, and the Concorde then took off, and shortly after takeoff, engine 1 surged again and did not recover, and the left wing began to disintegrate, and the Concorde began to rotate asymmetrically because of the shift of gravity, and the crew tried to balance the airplane by lowering speeds to engines 3 and 4, but they lost control and crashed into a hotel, killing all 109 people on board the airplane and 4 people in the hotel. I think some values in this case were money, because the Concorde was a luxury airliner which had a higher fee and had a high yearly revenue for Air France. And two values that go together were time and the reputation, because the reputation of the Concorde, if it got out that it had many delays, then the Concorde would not be favored because of its high speeds and ability to get to places faster. Because of the delays, people would begin to then book with other types of airplanes and not pay that high fee for the Concorde. And the Concorde had already been delayed by an hour, so I think they were trying to hurry and get the Concorde back on track. So that's why I think time and the reputation were valued. Also, safety, I think, was valued by pilot Christian Marty, but I think he valued it in the wrong way because he was concerned about the reverse thrust mechanism, even though it was proven that the mechanism would be fine to fly the Concorde to New York. I think he should have been more concerned about the overweight of the Concorde because it shifted the center of gravity, and he was an experienced pilot who knew about the center of gravity and how it could affect the flight. Also, I think Air France should have valued the safety of its passengers and the crew on board its airplane, and they should have made sure that they were safe by making sure that the crew at the airport followed the takeoff protocol, which they didn't. And they also shouldn't have put pilot Christian Marty in a situation where he had to worry about the weight of the Concorde in the first place. They should have made sure that it was under capacity to begin with. Also, I would say this is a duty case, ethics case, because it was the duty of Air France to make sure that all of its people on board the airplane were safe because they had trusted Air France to make sure that the plane that they were going to be flying in was going to be safe and get them to New York safely. Also, as engineers, I think we could have designed the plane better to have an air gap between the underside of the airplane and the fuel tank, so if something like this were to occur, then the shockwave wouldn't go directly through the fuel tank. It would have an air pocket to allow the shockwave to dissipate some before going through the fuel tank. And I think a moral lesson we can learn from this case is to always hold human safety paramount. And in the Concorde case, we can do this by having designed the fuel tank in a better way and by following guidelines and protocols such as the runway takeoff protocol.